So just pausing while we still have a lot of people rolling in. So welcome everyone. Again, for those of you joining us, my name is Jody King and I am a contract specialist with the Alaska Procurement Technical Assistance Center. Just a quick who we are, what we do in case you are new to the PTAC world. We are a federally funded grant program. Our grant is housed with the University of Alaska, and of course we have a cooperative agreement between the Defense Logistics Agency and the state of Alaska that brings our program to the state of Alaska. And the important takeaway for you is why PTAC exists, and we're here to provide free assistance with all aspects of government contracting. So that includes federal, state, and local activity, and by all aspects, we truly mean start to finish, cradle to grave, all of the above. And that truly brings us to today's topic, a look at the new SAM website. And I have new in quotes, and maybe I'm one of those weird people that overuses quotes, but oh gosh, when was it? April, May? Why, how the time blurs. That the sam.gov and the beta sam.gov websites were merged. And this has been GSA's, the General Services Administration, goal to have one website where all these various requirements are rolled into to make it easier for contractors that have to go after and look for all of this information. A couple of years ago, we had FedBizOps that was moved into the contract opportunities. We've had parts of the federal procurement data system moved into the SAM arena. And now, of course, we have that entity management that we all know is just SAM. And of course, the beta SAM is gone. We just have that single SAM website. So while the merger has made things a little less confusing, not having two websites, it has changed some of the processes and how we actually go through and do these things in the SAM website. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I get started, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping with you all and call your attention to the GoToWebinar panel. Now, I only have a few slides, and really we're going to spend most of our time actually on the SAM website. So I've not printed the few slides that I have and made those available but as handouts. But I can, if you all would like that, just email me after the fact or just add a comment in the question box that you'd like the handouts, and then I'll make sure to email those to you after when we are finished today. So as far as question and answers, there's two ways we can go about this. And because this merger is still new and there seems to be more than one hat trick, a way to go about different things in the SAM site, I really want to encourage you all today to add comments, ask questions, and let's make this as much of a hands-on discussion so that we can all benefit from this event. I do have us blocked out for an hour and a half, and I might not need that full time, but if we can get really good discussion, good questions, and we can do much more specific examples, then fabulous. We have the time if we need it. So you can ask your questions one of two ways. There is a question box, and you are welcome to type out the question, or you can simply click on that raise hand feature, whether you're on the computer or on a smartphone or tablet. And when I see your name, I can let you know, call on you, and I can unmute you from my side, have you unmute yourself from your side, and let's have that discussion. So we miss out having that face-to-face time where people are more comfortable adding comments, adding discussion, but we've all been working in this remote world for a little over a year and a half now, and hopefully that's encouraged to get those questions noted. So please, by all means, even if you're just uncertain or there's no such thing as stupid questions. I know occasionally people try that theory, but really I'm asking you, please ask those questions, give me feedback, and feel free if you want me to do a specific example of, or you have a scenario of that we'd like to go over, by all means, Again, if you don't want to type it out, just click that raise that hand feature. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So moving on. So this is what we're going to be talking about. I already kind of gave you a brief overview of the newly merged SAM sites, why it happened, no more SAM versus beta SAM, because that could get really confusing. Although I'm not sure if the new process isn't still with a little bit confusing. So we're going to talk a lot about entity registration renewal, accessing your entity profile, because really it's that access point for your entity registration identified currently by those DUNS numbers that has changed drastically. Once you're into that entity registration, then from there on it looks exactly like the old SAM process, but it's just getting it started. That's really confusing. And there's new security features in place, and we'll talk about that as well. We're going to also talk about the contract opportunities search change, because they did, just prior to the merger, GSA did go in, and I think that was April, and then the merger was May. But they did go in and change that contract opportunities page. They streamlined it a little bit and consolidated some of the drop-down menus. So it's smoother, but if you don't understand how they consolidated, it's also a little bit confusing. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at wage determinations and how to find that. We're going to talk a bit about using the pre-generated reports that was ported over from the FPDS site, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But most of the time I'm going to spend on is the tricks of that entity registration and then using those changes in the contract opportunities. All right, so again, I just have a few slides to start off. I'm just going to quick walk through what's what from this home page, and then we're going to go right to my SAM profile and actually play in the SAM site. And again, guys, truly ask me those questions. If you want me to do a specific search or use your DUNS number as an example, again, the more that we can show, the better I think we can learn from this. And if you found a trick that we haven't, please, again, share that with us. All right, so looking at, again, homepage, and what I've done is I've just kind of gone, grabbed a screenshot across the top here from where we have home, search, data bank, and I'm just going to go through this really quickly, and then we're going to move over to this section where we talk about registering your entity. So here's again the home screen, and you can get to this by either clicking home, or you can click on the icon, which brings you back to the home screen. And often if I need to reset, no matter what I'm working in, back out and start over, I'll just click on the SAM icon, which brings me back to that home screen, and then dive back into what it is that I was working with. The next one is our search feature. And we are going to spend a lot of time on this, and this is where I'm going to go to the actual website and play, so I will come back to this. I'm just kind of going in order of the tabs. The data bank for the contract data, you can see how we have this dark bar, so it kind of shows us the different reports that we can download. We have the different static. Honestly, I have not used this much. If I'm looking for specific past procurement activity, I currently find it a lot easier to go to FPDS and do a search because I'm looking for something specific. If you are looking for big data and you want to download, have that on your desktop, then this data bank, or going into these data services where you can see they have the file extracts listed, then you can download that as well. Some of this data bank, when we get into it, this administrative ad hoc, some of that is only accessible for federal and not necessarily for us that have the SAM registration that are not federal. And truly, I can't give you a whole lot of detail on this because I simply have just not taken the time to play with it. For those of you that have solicitation search software subscriptions, like the PTAX bid match, a lot of times those search companies are coming in here and they are taking advantage, and they're downloading that new daily data, and then they are implementing it. So when that FPDS moved into this arena, there was quite a learning curve for those businesses as well. So quite honestly, that is the entirety of what I'm going to focus on as far as the data bank and data services. We will play just a little if you do want to see where to get to those pre-made searches when we get into the live. And of course, the help. So the SAM site help has improved. And the nice thing that they have done is they've rolled their help, their FAQs, and they have created by topics. You can see each one here. If you're looking specific FAQ questions by topic, you can click on these dark blue links, these titles, and it'll take you over to that help section. What is new since they've merged it is they've created this live chat with the Federal Services Desk. So this is the FSD, the Federal Services Desk, their help desk for SAM. And you can go in and create an incident through their website, or you can use the live chat feature. And we're going to talk about this a bit more because this really comes into play if we're having issues with that entity registration or that broken link between logging in and actually having access to our entity registrations as identified by those DUNS numbers. So I am going to be going into that quite a bit. All right. Now, before we get back into our actual search, let's talk about the workspace. So if you remember, let me hop back up here to the beginning. So we sign in, we click this little tiny sign in button. I think that needs to be bigger, more obvious. I missed the big blue login button that made it so handy for working with people on the over the phone and using GoToMeeting. It's like the big blue button. No, it's like the little tiny gray sign in button. But once you sign in to SAM, we wind up in on the workspace. And sorry, let me hop back to here. So I have two different SAM profiles. I have one with my personal email address, which I kind of have blanked out here, that my actual SAM registration, my entity is identified and is locked under. And so you guys will see the DUNS number in that for my SAM registration. I will admit I do have that blocked from the public search because I only have a SAM registration for purpose of doing SAM training or while I'm working with clients as a PTAC employee. It's been really helpful to have my own SAM registration. But because I am not actively seeking federal contracts, I do have that blocked out. So we are going to talk about, again, using SAM for the focus of updating our SAM record, updating that DUNS number, updating our entity information. Through the years, we've all had different acronyms and different ways that we've identified what it is. And when we think SAM versus the beta SAM, we think about that for the entity registration. One of the biggest confusions when we talk about that is there is that misunderstanding of the difference between an individual account in SAM and your entity registration. To be able to log into SAM, we create that login, that individual account, and of course that starts with creating that access with the login.gov page, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in here in just a minute. And then that gives us access into SAM. We set up our individual account. From there, we then register our entity, the business or organization that is represented by that 9-digit DUNS number. So after we log into SAM, and in this case with my personal registration, I do have my username is linked to that DUNS number. So when I log in, it drops me into the workspace, and this is what I see. Under my entity management, I can see that I have one active registration. The next update is March 25th, 2022. I don't have any drafts. I don't have any work progress. I honestly don't even know what the PHRR is. I haven't even looked at that. Since I don't have any federal contracts, I don't have any reporting requirements that is scheduled. So if you have that bio preferred or those service contract reports, you should see that as the agency triggers that. You'll see that from your workspace as well. So things that I want to call attention to is we do have profile, and if you click on your profile, and we'll play with this just a little bit once we're in the live space so you can see the difference. But often, and I've worked with quite a few clients that have had an old SAM registration that might have expired years ago, or they set up a different email and you've created your login through that login.gov access and you have a different email and you pop in here and it looks more like this. I should hop back up, but we have zeros across the board. So let's talk about that. First, I'm going to hop back a slide. So I'm going to change tracks on you because I have all the power at the moment. So what we talk about is if I click on here in the entity registration, if I actually click on this one for active, then it is going to take me over to my SAM registration. And of course, I'm set up as a sole proprietor, so that legal business name is this Jody King. If I had a DBA, it would show here. And then since it's in blue, that means it's hyperlinked back to my entity. If you come in here and you've found your SAM registration, you've done a search, your DUNS number, we'll play more with this, and it's in black, you don't have access to actually go in and update your SAM profile. So I was playing with this because I wanted to get more screenshots of what it looked like after I clicked on my name, you know, getting into that and seeing that transition where the change has been made from the SAM to this merge SAM beta SAM site, getting into the profile. But once you're at that point of going in, selecting that entity, from there it really does look like the old site. So last night I clicked on my name and I got a new tab that popped up with this big forbidden, don't have access, I don't have permission to access this resource. So I don't know if any of you have run into this or not. This was it's like aha moment for me. And fortunately, I've worked with other clients that I know what has happened. So, gosh, I don't even remember how many years ago. For those of you been around for a while, do you remember when GSA created these notarized entity administration letters? And we actually had one whole fiscal year where you couldn't activate your SAM until SAM had received that actual physical notarized copy of your SAM letter, that entity administrator letter, and they were able to review it and apply it. And we had this huge delay of months because SAM, the GSA folks, were just immediately inundated with more workload than they actually had staff. Well, then it was changed of, well, okay, we'll skip that. You still have to do it, but you have to send us that entity administrator letter within 60 days of submitting your SAM profile, or we'll come back and inactivate your active registration. Well, that didn't really happen either. And for years, I got away with, and I will admit that I was bad at this, but I got away with not submitting a notarized entity administrator letter since that was required because there really wasn't anybody going in and checking to see if that had been applied. Well, I got caught. So just heads up for all of those of you that have been able to do that up until, honestly, and I would just say it's within the past couple of weeks that this has been implemented. Let's see, the last time I was in there, I think actually has a record of the last draft, March. But the last time that I was in here and played with this and created a work in progress. So it's within the last month that this has been implemented. Because I have never submitted an entity letter, I am not, myself, Jody King, am not recognized as the official entity administrator for the entity and under this DUNS number, under this business name, and therefore I am in essence locked out of my profile. And it's kind of funny because if you go into the profile, and this is the next page, Oh, nope, that's my other one. Hang on, guys. When we look at it and we look at my roles that are assigned, and we're gonna talk about this a little bit here too, but when we look at the roles that are assigned, when I created my SAM process back when Beta SAM was in play, and on the SAM site, I had identified myself as entity administrator, and the roles assigned to me when we look in at my profile show that I have designated myself as entity administrator. But however, since that role wasn't approved, wasn't assigned by the GSA Tech Desk, I cannot get into my SAM profile until I submit that. And we'll talk about that a little bit. I have a screen here that shows you where to find all of that. But surprise to me, who had gotten away with it scot-free all these years, my bad deeds have caught up with me. And so if I were actively needing my SAM registration and I wanted to go in and add a NAICS code because I was going to pursue a federal activity, I have now hamstrung myself and I can't get into this. Now, we have worked with quite a few clients. We use the Royal We for PTAC, where we have old registrations and have pulled up the entity information and have linked, and where it's been in black, and that really just means that those registrations aren't linked, that DUNS number isn't associated with that username, that those two are not linked. So let's talk a little bit more about that. And again, if you guys have questions, want to add comments or experience, or say shame on me for I should know better, feel free, raise your hand, add those comments. So let me move to my next slide here. All right, so as we can see, this is my work login. So again, I have two, which kind of confuses the login.gov when I'm hopping between the two. But this is my work email that I use for logging in when I'm doing searches, and when I'm doing presentations, often I will log in with this. And the reason I have two is because I can go in and show everything and do all the searches just without having to worry about any of my personal data being displayed from my SAM entity information. So if you log into your SAM registration and you are sitting at your workspace and you are seeing zeros all across under this entity management, entity registration, it means a couple of different things. One, that there is no DUNS number associated with this username. And again, I was working with somebody and we actually had to contact the Federal Services Desk because their SAM had sat dormant for a little while. And they were able to tell us that, no, you have a different email associated. And it was long enough ago, he had forgotten that he had switched that email address. So when he logged in and created that new SAM.gov account, created that account through the login.gov linked back to the SAM, he used his current business email. And what we had to do then is go back and create a new login with his old email address so that the system then linked that DUNS number to his email. Anyone have questions on that? If you do, or you're having problems but don't want to necessarily talk about it now, you can always welcome to talk to any of us at PTAC for help with that, because it's a little bit confusing. That's actually a fairly common issue. We also at times just run into where the link between your DUNS number and your username is broken in that database. It worked before, and then all of a sudden you come in and there's nothing. And then we have to submit that help ticket through the Federal Service Desk to have that link reassociated. Or item two, what does all the zeros mean, is no role assigned. Now, that makes sense because, again, this is my work number, and while I linked my DUNS number, my personal DUNS number in my profile, I have no actual association for access between this individual, this email address, and that DUNS number. So for example, for those of you that are entity administrators, and possibly you're the entity administrator for multiple companies, think of in the case of if you have multiple subsidiaries that you're responsible for, you can have all of those registrations under one login, and then you can assign access roles to other individuals so they can go in and access their SAM registration for that specific subsidiary. So in that merger, for those that might not have had those entity administrator letters current or changed, If that has been lost or not applied correctly, then that might be the case. If you can see you have entities but you can't touch it, again, we need to work with the Federal Services Desk. The third possibility is that entity registration expired. And this is the most challenging trying to get in for SAM. So if you're in SAM, you've let your registration expire, there's no handy little button that says expired with the number that we could click on and pull it up. And in that case, we actually have to do a search, and we'll talk about that because there's two different routes to do that. And for those of you that like communicating with GSA, don't forget they have that button where you can provide feedback. And I have many times said, why can't you have a little bullet there or a little pill button? I guess they make me think of the old Medicaid capsules, those little pill buttons where it actually says expired. We have active, draft, work in progress, submitted. Why can't we have something that's expired and link that back to our home screen? Okay, so if you log in and there's all zeros, we could have one of these three problems. Questions, anyone? Okay, looks like I'm losing you all. By the way, I have my nice little control panel that shows me when somebody changes screens and goes to something else. All right, so this is the profile. I just want to call this to your attention again. From that workspace, if you click on the word profile, this is where it takes you. It shows you your roles. So I wanted to show you again, I actually do have the role as administrator for my entity number. And again, these were things that I had self-assigned back when the SAM database first came into play in the beta SAM. But since I didn't have that entity letter, oops, sorry guys, of course, it doesn't matter that I've assigned it because it hasn't been assigned by GSA. But this is where you can look under your entities for those of you that are entity administrators under the roles. There is another section where you can see all of the roles that have been assigned for that entity, where you can do entity role management if you have allowed access by other individuals back to the SAM registrations. Okay, assigning an entity administrator. Let me just kind of go over this and then we'll really get over to that hands-on and get into SAM and do a walkthrough. So I have the link here, and I suppose if nothing else, you guys should have the slides just for this link. It rises right from the help desk on SAM. You download the template, you complete the form, you sign and notarize. You can create a help ticket on the fsd.gov website. Or if you'd like, you're more than welcome to reach out to PTAC and we can help you with this process as well. And we are requesting simply to have GSA associate the DUNS to the username, or in like my case where they're already linked, assign my entity administrator role. You attach that notarized letter and then you wait for GSA to respond. They've been pretty good. I submitted a help ticket yesterday and I actually got the response today. So after all of the crazy delays last year from everyone working remotely, it seems that the response time for the Federal Services Desk is kind of back on schedule. So this year, the most I've had to wait is a couple of days for response. So we are back to a normal turnaround time for those. So if you do have questions for the Federal Services Help Desk, again, don't forget they have that online option. You can do the chat, you can call them, or you can create the help ticket. And of course, you're always welcome to call PTAC if you have questions on why are you having difficulties accessing your SAM registration. So on assigning roles, again, for those of you that have multiple, there is this assign role button under the workspace, under your profile. And I just wanted to kind of give you a screenshot. Here, I had roles assigned because again, in my home SAM, I had my work email assigned as a point of contact so I could try to link in. And so I have linked here, or you can simply do add a new role where you are sending a request outwards. If you're the entity administrator, you can send a request to individuals that they can then accept to have roles, or as an individual, you can send a request to the entity administrator requesting access. So that does work either way. The one thing I do want to note for any of you that are not the entity administrator but do need access to your SAM profile, you do have to have a SAM login created on that login.gov access before you do the request, because if it can't find your individual account in SAM, then of course that you won't be able to submit that request for a role. Okay, so let's go to the live demo. Screenshots are fun, but let's actually get in here and start playing. So let me get out of this for a second and go over into SAM. Let's see if it's gonna make me log back in. All right, questions, anyone? I know that entity administrator part, logging in, accessing is a bit confusing, a bit much if you already know what you're talking about. Okay, so from SAM, again, there's a couple of different ways to access it. Once you log in, and it did sign me out, so I'm gonna accept my terms and conditions. I'm gonna sign in. Oh, look at that. Sorry about that, guys. I even made sure to log in just before so it wouldn't ask me for my code. Let me enter that. Okay. And you can see, again, we're right back into my workspace. Make sure this is large enough so everyone can see it easily. Now, let's talk Workspace for just a second. And back to the contract opportunities, our saved searches are following. So if we logged in, if we've been working through, you can see all my notifications. And these are for opportunities that I've been following that have been updated. So we can go through and take a look at here. Here's that screen if we're adding a new role or requesting a role. So the difference between add or request. Just wanted to show you where that was at. And again, let's go back to home. So say this is the case, you logged in, you're in your workspace. Again, you had all of these zeros. Your only goal today is just to update your entity. You know it's expired, what the heck? So I just like hitting the icon, get back home. So we can come in here, and this is where under this register your entity, of course, getting started if you're entering a new, but if you're renewing, this is your access point. Now, basically, what it's done is it has brought you to the search screen, but it's already pre-selected the domain. And what we're doing is we want to do a search by our entity, and this is where we can plug in that DUNS number and pull that information up. And bear with me just a little bit. Of course, if I pull up my DUNS number, it's just going to show it's not available. So if we do have an inactive expired registration, again, extend this entity, plug in your DUNS number, hit search, and it's going to pull it up. And then if the name's in black, it's not accessible to you, we'll have a different problem. But if that name's in blue, from there you can click on that link, and then it's going to take you into your entity and you can start your update process. And once you've actually accessed the entity, it really truly looks exactly the same as your standard SAM registration update, just like it did prior to the site mergers. If you're trying to access it from your workspace, and again, zeros, you can come in here, do a search, and again, select entity information, which takes us right back, and then click, we're gonna extend entity, add your DUNS number, but then you also have to click inactive, and then it can pull up that information. Of course, right now I'm just a search. Obviously, I don't have access to this. But if it is inside and it's your DUNS, again, you should be able to go in and update. So there's two different resources. The easiest route with the least amount of issues for anybody that's helping anyone or working with your entities expired, if you go through this entity, renew entity button, for some reason that link between your username and those expired profiles just simply works smoother. Go figure. Okay, So that's really it for me on SAM registrations, entity registration. Of course, if you're getting started, if you have a new registration in the case of entering like a second business or a new subsidiary, this is our get started point. You have to sign in. All right, so let's talk about contract opportunities. So there's a couple of different ways that we can go about it. We can click on contract opportunities, and it's kind of taking us to the home page for that. We've got our big search filter, but really this is the longer way to go. If you're trying to get into other information related to contract opportunities, then clicking on that link in the blue box really takes you to that home page. It talks about, here's your frequently asked questions. They have some videos on how to use the basic search features, a little bit of training, terms, getting started. Okay, so they do have that information. Quite honestly, if the only reason we're in SAM, we've signed in, and we want to do a search, then it's just easier, quite honestly, go right to the search page. And here we go. Now, the way this is set up, you can enter any keyword and do a search. So if we are looking for somebody's DUNS number, and maybe it's expired or not expired, because we've got the little button here, we can plug in a DUNS number and do a search. And honestly, you're going to have a 50-50 if you're going to find that DUNS number or not. So say that you're looking at subcontractors to see if they have any excluded parties listing. So you're looking them up for that information or contact information, and you keep plugging a DUNS number in here and you're not finding anything, the database isn't as strong in that search requirement. Picking your domains is really going to simplify and clean up your search process. So if you are looking for a business, come in here, click on this, extend it, go to that entity information, extend, and enter that DUNS number. And of course, you can always click active, inactive, and enter that DUNS number and do a search. I'm just going to grab this one here. It's really an odd, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If I'm just doing a generic search, I plug that in and go. Like I said, if it's inactive, it tends to break. So entity registrations, it will save you a lot of time if you go into that entity domain, extend this out. All right, so the one that most of us are probably interested in today is really that contract opportunities. So let's get in here and talk about your search criteria. The search process for contract opportunities is still the same as it was in Beta SAM. What they've done is they've just consolidated some of your search options to try to give you a tighter search screen. And of course, how your search results are returned has changed dramatically as well. One of the first things we do, again, if you know specifically what you're looking for, if you have a specific solicitation number that you are looking for, and you know that, you can just plug that in right honestly from that home search screen and go. You can even select your domain from that opportunity, put that contract listing in here. Let me throw an example. Okay, so if we know exactly what we're looking for, then we can plug that in and go from the home screen. But if you're trying to find a group of data, truly it's better to go ahead and select that domain and then start working on your filters. Keywords, so we can enter keywords. You can comma separate them, you can enter one at a time. One of the things to note that when you're doing your search in the contract opportunities domain is that when you add keywords, it's inclusive. It's expanding your search. It's not necessarily narrowing your search. So if you wanted something like highway and construction, if you wanted to really try to break that down to have less, so again, we have 19,000 versus if I just did construction and then added highway. The old and this, that, hit and miss. Just takes practice. So we can add our keywords, and again, as I come in here and I'm throwing more words, we are just expanding our pool. So you can see now I've expanded it looking at these various terms. We have our federal organizations where we can enter the codes. And honestly, I use this a lot. So if I am, let me clear all of this. If I'm looking just for JBER activity, I can actually come in here, Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson, and plug it in. And JBER is a lovely keyword search because it's really unique. And whether it's Air Force, Army, or even Corps of Engineers, if it's a Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson project, JBER's in there somewhere, so it's a great search term. But what if we were looking for Eielson Wainwright and we wanted to come in and pick the search? Then you can enter the code here if you want, but it's almost easier to hit that three, what do they call that? The ellipsis, where I have the 3 dots. And then I can come in here and enter. So Army Air Force Exchange. If I'm looking specifically for Air Force Department, Air Force, and use this feature to, if we're looking for a specific agency. So now I have the overarching agency, and if I only care about Alaska, then I can come in here and enter either place of performance by state. And you want to be careful not just to type in Alaska. You want to actually, even if you just type it in, make sure that you're clicking and selecting that terminology so you have a better. Or we could even come in here and put in the word Alaska as a keyword search. Now, I have had different results using Alaska as a search word versus Alaska as a place of performance. And I have noticed not all solicitations have identified a place of performance, especially if you have a regional IDIQ that might have multiple states, then they might not have identified a single place of performance. And that's where just throwing the word, that state name in as a keyword can help you with that search. But I have just depending, so sometimes if you're trying to find a specific, keep that in mind, use that place of performance, but also use it as a keyword or either or, if not both at the same time, because you don't want to make it too restrictive where it's showing up in both places, where it's both been identified as a place of performance and it's in here in the title or in the description somewhere where we're using it as a keyword. One of the biggest complaints that I get with contract opportunities is we see a lot of old notices that pop up in our active search. Unfortunately, when we had the search mechanism that was FedBizOpps, the Federal Business Opportunities, setting an archive date wasn't a mandatory feature. It was optional. And so sometimes the contracting officers could create an archive, an inactive date, in which then the system would archive that data and not consider it current. So we do have a lot of old FedBizOpps, you can see, and there's really not, GSA hasn't really gone in to clean up some of this old data to toggle that archive. Of course, any new activity since the contract opportunity has been in play, the archive is a mandatory feature, and the default is, I believe, it archives like 15 days past the bid due date. So if you're tired of looking at all of this old stuff, because we are just making it harder for ourselves, this is where we can use the date feature, and it just says dates. It used to be multiple boxes that you could pick and choose. And we can come in here by this updated anytime, because updated anytime also includes, you know, when the initial announcement was placed, plus of course any amendments to the solicitation. You can, if you want to sort and find everything that is due to expire, we can put a date. In that case, if we wanted to, everything that's going to expire today and tomorrow, we can actually plug a date in. And of course, see, now we're getting all the activities, and I've oversimplified. So the Department of Air Force in Alaska doesn't have anything that's going to the bid due date today or tomorrow. So just be careful, but I do want to show you using these features helps. So let me go ahead and clear this. There is a clear button, but often I found if we come in here and say updated date, and we just grab anything past year, past 3 months, past month, now we're getting rid of all of those old 2017. So for just a few seconds, just telling it only updated in the past, whatever time frame we're looking at, that's really going to help dump out that old data. All right, so we can keep going through and play with keywords. Say we don't care about using Alaska or place of performance. Usually if you're just doing an agency sort, it's good to have some sort of state identifier, unless you're just trying to find contact information. All right, other search features that are really handy. We do have notice type. So if you are looking for, say, a specific award notice, sources sought, any of that type of information, justifications, a type of specials. Let me grab something. Sources sought. Let me actually use my mouse correctly so I can give you guys some examples. So if we're just looking for sources sought. So this is a great way of looking for what might be upcoming too. So just depending, or if you hear a rumor of, yeah, I saw this work, I don't know if the solicitation's out yet, or I sent a sources sought, but I don't quite remember, and we're trying to chase that down, we can come in here and use these notice types to help look for specific. If you're looking for award notices, this is a great way too. So if you're looking for marketing material, maybe you're a vendor providing and you're looking for certain types and you want to reach out to those that have recently won a contract, then again, notice type is really handy. All right, let me get rid of that. Product or service information. So this is where they've plugged the NYX codes and PSC codes. One of the nice features of this is you don't have to enter the entirety of the NYX code. So for example, if you're doing construction, you can actually enter just the 2.3, which includes everything construction, as opposed to looking for a specialty contractor where we, specially trade, again, 238, 237. So being able to enter a partial NAICS code, services 561, administrative support 56. So here, waste management, remediate. So if you can't quite remember specifically what NAICS code you're looking for, they've really made this search to get your NAICS information incredibly helpful. And you do not have to necessarily put in that entire 5-digit NAICS code, and using these partial NAICS codes can be really, really handy if you're looking for specific activity and you want to roll this down. So if you're not familiar with that and you're trying to search, again, just use these partial NAICS codes. Don't try to use the full 5-digit unless you're looking for something very specific, because again, that really can help extend and give you that search. One of the things that I want to pull to your attention, if you are looking for award data and it might have been 6 months ago, you will have to click this inactive to be able to see if it's anything that's been past that notice date. So again, if you are looking for award data or you're trying to find an older contract, you will have to come in here and toggle that it's inactive. And then if you want, you can even tie in those dates. Again, you can put a custom date if you're looking for something that was last year or even 2 years ago and you're trying to find old archived solicitation information. And again, this is one of the purposes of this new contract opportunities. Now, granted, I know it's been in place for long enough that the word new isn't, but compared to FedBiz Ops, it had a very limited archive. If you were trying to pull any solicitations that were more than a year old, it was very challenging to find that solicitation data. With contract opportunities, if you are trying to look for old solicitation, this is much better set. And of course, the longer we use this contract opportunity, the better that searching in the archive for old solicitations will be. But just don't forget, you do need to have that inactive toggled as well. Questions on this? Thought for sure we'd get a lot of questions on using contract opportunity. Anyone have any search questions, search issues that they're having problems with? Would like me to do a specific example of a search? You are more than welcome in the question box to say, you know, look up this type of work for this type, just feel free. All right, or for those of you that are looking out that Sunday window and want to be done early, then apparently no questions are going to be better. But please, again, feel free to ask questions, guys. All right, so search features, they haven't changed much. The biggest difference is they've really consolidated these boxes, and you kind of have to understand, here's a good question. Do you know how a quick way to locate JVs in SAM? That is a good question. Let me think about that for a second, Melanie, and I'll come back to it. So real quick before I switch, this is again, contract opportunities. Select that domain and pre-filter. So let's take this question and JVs, if we're looking for JVs, those joint ventures, that means we're looking for entities that have registered as JV. So we want to be in the entity information domain. So that's the first thing. And what we can do is I would say add JV, and I would play with location, start Alaska. There we go. Unfortunately, most joint ventures actually have the word JV, have that acronym in their title. So again, if you want active, inactive, you can break it down. So again, the trick is being in the entity domain. We can still use those keywords. We can have the entity type, but honestly, at this point, we don't care right now. Really what we're looking for is a list. And then if you want, you can even break it down by city. No results found. Well, so much for breaking it down by city. Oh, I'm sorry. I was putting the city in the state code. Here we go. Okay. So again, we can plug in our city. That would be one way, and of course, inactive. So I've come up with 128 results where we have the word JV as a keyword. We can try putting it in as an entity name, but I think in this case, using the JV, that's my recommendation. Okay, so question Melody continues. I've been using a standard report, drilling down with several levels. And somebody else, good input. Thanks, Melanie. We have two Melanies. So instead of just using JV, we can extend that keyword search. Close that back up. Even doing J/V, because you're right. Beyond that, for a quick guess, I think I would have to do more plain to see if that is getting the same results that you're looking for, Melanie, and by doing your standard reporting. All right, so I'm going to move away from contract opportunities. If we have any other questions, or you guys are thinking about it, or you want me to go back again, please. Okay, so let's talk a bit about wage determinations. Now, I don't know how many of you have actually gone in and done a wage search. So it's pretty straightforward as far as, am I looking at construction, this public buildings work, Davis-Bacon Act, or are we looking for Service Contract Act? So if you know from which, you can kind of jump start here and start breaking it down. Filter it by state, by location, it's odd and even numbers. So it's not too bad to pull up. previously performed? Yes. Same locality? Is it subject to the collective bargaining agreement, CBA? Let's just say no. We don't have any non-standard services. And this whole, even an odd number, most of the odd number ones are slowly, that's a whole different. So if we did have non-standard again, we can kind of start seeing these. But I want to do a little bit of a soapbox spiel. For those of you that are responding to a solicitation, and there are languages, there's clauses that are defining that the Service Contract Act is applicable for the solicitation, it's a service contract, or if it's a construction, or even in some cases, grant, where you have the Davis-Bacon Related Act. But if it's Davis-Bacon Act, DBA, or the Service Contract Act, and you are seeing that language in your solicitation, you should absolutely always have a solicitation, have that wage determination attached to your solicitation. And if you actually see one that doesn't have that wage determination, you want to push that contracting officer to apply that, because wage determinations are tricky things. So let me pause. First of all, let me just do a teaser trailer because I have everyone's attention. I am doing a wage determination workshop as an AGC Lunch and Learn October 19th. That is now posted on our PTAC website. And I know we'll start seeing it in Kimberly Gray's emails for AGC going out. And of course, even if you're not an AGC member, that's a free webinar you can join. And we'll really do a deeper dive on wage determinations. So just heads up for that. So I'm not going to necessarily argue all of the small details about a wage determination, but as we're coming in here and searching, and if I'm looking for Alaska and maybe county, so okay, Bristol Bay, it's, you know, and I have the Service Contract Act, and I have two different wage determinations with these different revisions. I don't necessarily know which one I should assume is applicable from that for that solicitation. And what if I use one and somebody else uses a different one, and by chance those labor categories actually have a differing rate or different requirements? Also, what happens if you have priced on an older wage determination and suddenly, because there was no wage determination in the solicitation, and congratulations, you've won the contract, and all of a sudden a wage determination shows up and it is not the same that you used to base your pricing on? Now, again, we have an immediate discrepancy on your base rates, and already you're having to have a discussion for a change in your pricing. So it is the contracting officer's responsibility to determine which wage rate is applicable for a solicitation. And the contracting officers actually have a direct line for the Department of Labor to get help with deciding which wage rate is appropriate if they have odd labor classifications, or they're not certain which labor classification. So we had, again, those non-standard services. So if we have something that falls outside of the normal, and the contracting officer is the only one that can send that to Department of Labor and request them to assign the appropriate wage determination for that particular labor classification. And since you do not have that as access as a contractor, as the vendor, that has to go through the contracting officer. So it's really important that they apply the wage determinations. Now, one of the things that I want to bring up, and I will go in more detail, is a wage determination can be valid for up to 2 years before a new wage determination has to be applied. So for a contracting officer, say we have various wage determinations attached to your solicitation, the contracting officer is supposed to look to see if that wage determination that was associated with the solicitation has been updated prior to contract award. And if it has, then of course that allows for discussion with the apparent awardee prior to that contract being executed. If you have a contract that's newly awarded, you are prescribed a wage determination that stays with you for that duration of the contract up to 2 years. So searching for wage determination is handy. It's even handier if you know exactly what you're looking for. So I went through this morning and I pulled up a couple of different solicitations, and I just wanted to show you the difference. So this first solicitation or wage determination here, you can see the type, this highway construction project, and we have a general decision number here, AK 20. And if you're just trying to get a clean copy, or you want to see if this is a new, if this has been updated or has a new revision, then we can just take that number, come back into SAM for our wage determination ID. Let me reset everything, and you can just plug that in. Oh, no matches found. So that means I didn't pull the correct number. Superseded general decision. That is really odd that I am not finding that. All right, let's move on. So again, here's a difference that was attached. Again, we can see building and heavy. And that's one of the things where it looks like multiple wage determinations could be used. Oops, hang on guys, let me go through this. I have 2 construction pulled up. Oh, I closed one page that I shouldn't have. All right. So there's different types of construction. We have building and heavy, and we have roadway. And you can see the same type of labor categories on those 2 different in the construction arena. But again, which one is the appropriate one to be used for that solicitation? And those wage rates can vary, even though they're both construction, they're both listed here, but there could be a difference between whether they are considered this building and heavy versus roadway. And ultimately, that's not your responsibility to decide which is the appropriate. That's why it's very important that you get the contracting officer to assign a wage determination so that everyone is using that same one, because most likely that then will be applied for your contract. All right, so this is a Service Contract Act, the wage determination number right here, our revision number. So again, if I'm coming into SAM, Service Contract Act, it would probably help if I pick the right there we go, wage determination. There we go. I might have been under the service contract when I was trying to use a DB8 number. So now I can come in here, I can see revision 12, I can see the published date. So if you want to have a heads up and you have a posted solicitation, so this is revision 11 for that solicitation, there is a possibility, and you can see that there's been a new revision since then. If you're in that solicitation phase and the bid date is not yet upon you, there is that possibility that just prior to award, that new solicitation, that new wage rate could be applied. So there are times that you can come into SAM and search for wage determination, but if you are actually looking at a solicitation that calls out wage determination, it shouldn't be your responsibility to come in here and find it. You truly do want the contracting officer to have that. Because ultimately, if the Department of Labor comes in and does an audit for you and you are using the wrong wage determination, it really doesn't matter if it was you or it was the agency, it still has to be corrected. So we really truly want to have all of that start with the correct wage determination. So it is fairly easy to search. Again, may just come back here, home, so I can clear. Like I said, it's easiest to come back, clear. And again, am I looking for construction? Am I looking for service? And then we can see, we can come in here by state and we can pull up all of the different questions on any of that. All right. Probably more information on looking at wage determinations than anyone cared for this beautiful sunny afternoon. But I did want to show you how you can do that information. All right, so going back home here again, one of the things that we're going to talk about that I had listed that we're going to go over is the contract data. Okay, and I haven't played with this much. I didn't even play with it a whole lot when it was still part of the FPDS site, but these are reports that are pre-built that you can use to run to pull information from FPDS. So depending on if you're looking for standard, ad hoc, administrative, you can go in here and go to the standard reports and kind of pick and choose what that you're looking for, and start playing with the various awards by contractor type, bundle consolidated, place of American Act if you're looking for specific, the type of competition, competitive. So these are all pre-done reports that's going to pull you a large amount of data. So again, this information is here, that it was under the FPDS. So there's some confusion, the FPDS gone away, but right now the full intent of FPDS is, I know they're slated to move into the SAM world. I don't know when that is going to happen. But right now, if you're looking for bulk data for pre-generated reports, this is the best way to do it. But if you're looking for individual specific activity, then you'll want to go directly to the FPDS site and do your searches there. Okay. Back home. Now, information. Let's go back. I want to hop into the workspace just a little. I'm going to take about 5 more minutes of your time, and if we don't have any more questions, then we'll get going. One of the things that I wanted to bring up that I saw last night is there is talk, linked to profile, about having to apply contractor ID. There's a new security feature that hasn't yet been put into place. And I think I need to go to my other login where I actually had my entity associated. And there's a bright yellow bar that talks about uploading identity confirmation, security purposes. So there is processes in play that's looking like it might be implemented into 2022, where entity administrators, in addition to having your notarized letter, you are also going to have to upload state-approved, state-issued, government-issued identification, and they'll actually have the picture of that ID that's uploaded. So that link is there, but I don't believe I'm going to be able to pull that up. I saw it when I was logged in with my SAM registration that had an actual entity registration. So for my personal, had that bright yellow bar. And I did play with it to try to get some screenshots, and currently there's nothing behind it. But just a heads up, there is actions in play to make that a requirement. They might start off voluntary as, you know, further securing your entity information, but that should fall into play, I would say, sometime mid-2022. So that is in the works. Contracting officers have already been given heads up that contractors will be required to do this. So just heads up for you, if you do see that, don't worry about it. It hasn't been incorporated yet. So this is our newly merged SAM website. The biggest changes, again, just kind of to recap, is getting into your profile. And the best way to do that is if you go through your workspace and you have that active, you can click on the button, ta-da, it's there, you click on your business name, you're good to go. If you have an inactive, then of course we're going to want to do that through that homepage and through the Renew Entity. New registration, simply click on this Get Started. The other biggest area again is that contract opportunities. So while the search data has improved, the search information has improved itself, again, I just want to remind you that the best thing to do to have the cleanest search is from your search screen, start off by selecting that domain, whether contract entity, that contract opportunities, or again, if you're looking for those business information in SAM, then select that entity information so that you can have the entity keywords to plug in. And that's going to clean up a lot of your search. So I do have one question. Can you discuss the role types and the differences? So under the roles, requesting a role, again, that was under Workspace, and add a new role. So adding a new role, if I'm an entity administrator, I can then select the type of row. So viewer just might be somebody that we don't want to change, but it's within the company and they might need access to the SAM information that is available more than just the public search. Or data entry actually means they can go in and update. So the entity compliance, my understanding is when we're talking entity compliance, that is back for the doing data entry. Which I didn't need to hop. Sorry about that. Oh, see, I don't have the entity register. I don't have a DUNS number associated. Where it had the bio-based reporting and the service contract reporting. So that would be the compliance issue for entity compliance. They're either going to enter or they're going to view if you need them to be able to go in and see your old reports. Entity registration, again, this is specifically to what we identify as the DUNS number. So again, data entry or viewer. And then contracts, this, my understanding, anything under the contracts is still federal only. So if we're saying that I want data entry, I'm going to give somebody a new role, I verify I can request this role and it should pop up and ask. Here we go. So now I'm going to enter the DUNS number. I have my role, domain, reporting, registration, entity registration. Why that's in here twice, I don't know. Additional information, and then I can submit this. So if you have one of your project managers that would like access to SAM, they can then request that role. Or if you are actually the entity administrator and you do this, it will then send them. The biggest difference is if you're the entity administrator or not. Does that make sense, Wanda? It's hard to show you because I'm using my work email, which doesn't have my DUNS number under it. It's a little different when I'm in my personal SAM registration requesting a role, because then it's actually going to ask me for a email address because it's going to see which individual I'm offering to have a role. If you have any questions, Wanda, I'd be glad to help you offline. We can always set up an appointment, or any one of us at PTAC if you are trying to set that up. I don't want to log into my personal SAM profile where I actually have an option to send permission to someone to accept a role versus my work SAM where all I can do is request a role. So Wanda says, I only need to search and view. So would I use contracts, reviewer? No, the contracts, again, is just for the federal agency. If somebody just needs, I think I need a little bit more detail. Wanda, let me unmute you so we can have a discussion. So I've unmuted you from my end. You just have to unmute from your end so I can ask you specifically. So if they're looking for contract data, are you talking about the only time somebody's going to do data entry is if they have an entity information like your SAM profile that, again, we associate with the DUNS number, or we're doing compliance entry. So go ahead, Wanda, what is your question? I'm getting echoed, Wanda, but I'm not hearing you. I'm sorry, Wanda, I'm just not able to understand you. If you want to contact me after the workshop, I can give you much more. I'm just not picking anything up. You want to try one more time? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and close that out. So yeah, the only time you're really going to, if you're talking about searching for contracts, are you talking about searching for solicitations, or are you talking about, you said for reviewer, solicitation, contract reviewer? Yeah, let's have a different. So if we're searching in, even if you're just looking for contract opportunities and you want to search, you do have to be signed in. There is no longer, that's one of the biggest difference from the beta SAM, is you could search in contract opportunities without logging in. Now, to do any sort of solicitation search, you do need to be logged in. The benefit of being logged in is when you're doing that search, then you can ask to follow, or you can save your searches. So again, if you're in your workspace here, you can click on the binoculars and you can see all the different activities that you're following. And you can also come in here and look at all of your saved searches. So if we're talking roles, this is one thing, because I'm in, again, my workspace from my individual account. You can see what type of roles. It's either this domain, the contract opportunities, data entry is the only thing set up. There was a few things for contracting officers to set up under the contract, but again, that's agency only. Do I need a role to search? No, you don't necessarily have to have a role. So anyone can create an account with SAM. If you just sign in, of course, accept terms. And if you've never created an account before, you can just click create an account and follow the steps through. And all that's going to do is set up an individual account for SAM, and then you can go in and do your searches. If you have your various project managers or program guys have their individual account, and for some reason they need to access your SAM registration, that's when we have to get in for those roles. Or if your project management's going to do the compliance reporting, such as the bio preferred reporting or that service contract reporting, then they would need data entry roles under that. But the average person, if they are not involved in the entity registration, don't have to have any roles assigned. They don't even necessarily have to have their DUNS number linked. The only reason you would want to link a DUNS number is if, in case you wanted to add yourself as an interested vendor to the interested vendors list. In that case, you would have to go in and link your individual account to a DUNS number so it can link that entity information over. And again, that still doesn't necessarily require a role. All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to do a last call for questions. I know I have 10 more minutes left, but my audience has been dwindling. I think that sunshine is calling us all. So if you think of anything after the fact, by all means, please give us a call at PTAC. You are welcome to reach out to me. Let me pull our contact information. So here's our contact information for you. Of course, you can always reply to the invitation, the webinar invitation, if you're looking for my email address. And again, if you want any of these slides, go ahead and just email me and I'll be glad to send that out to you. Really, most of the value was actually getting there, playing on the website, and other than the link for the entity administrator letters, that's probably the only slide of value compared to everything else. So at this point in time, if I don't have any questions, I want to just take a moment to thank everyone for joining me today and wish you all a fabulous afternoon. Hopefully everybody can step outside and enjoy that sunshine. get those green sunny days while we can still do so. And if needed, PTAC is here to help. We have Pierre in the Fairbanks office. And of course, the Anchorage staff, Carolyn, myself, Craig, and Jacqueline, we're here to help you.